Hello everyone. So in this lecture we are going to talk very briefly about lever classes. Now if you're using the OpenStax or AUH A&P book, they talk about very basic terminology but they don't really talk about lever classes in detail. But just in case you're going to take more advanced anatomy and physiology or kinesiology courses, I'm going to introduce the concept here. Alright, so then first before we talk about levers, what's a lever? Well, it's something things that your muscles they work with your skeletal system and your joints to produce movements. But what has to happen is that they have to use their force to move some heavy object that and everything in your body has weight, has mass. So you need that. There's different ways of moving those weights around your body. So first class lever is kind of like a seesaw right here. But what is this L? What is this F? And what is this AF? So L refers to load, and load is just something weight being moved by some sort of force, and everything in your body has some sort of mass and weight. So that's whatever you're attaching this muscle to, whatever weight it's moving, that's the load. And then the fulcrum is a fancy term for a pivot or joint. So just like the joints in your body move and they cause and they're able to extend and flex and just have your bones move relative to each other, well, where they actually pivot relative to each other, that is the fulcrum. So in this case, like if it was like a seesaw or a pry bar, that would be the pivot that this little bar works against. And yeah. And then the applied force, or just sometimes just force, this is the actual force that's moving that heavy weight. So it's going to use that fulcrum to kind of have a leverage so that it can move that weight using some force applied somewhere with this. So in this case, this bar right here, this would be like a bone, and this fulcrum would be somewhere that's pivoting against, and force would be the contraction of the muscle, load whatever is being lifted by that muscle. So classic example is your joint between your occipital condyles and your A1, your atlas. So atlanto-occipital joint. So that is what we see is that, okay, if you just let this muscles right here in the back of your neck go lax, your head would actually go like this. But if these muscles contract and shorten, what they're going to do is shorten that distance between the back of your skull, this occipital bone, and your neck, back of your neck over here, the posterior. And by doing that, this lifts your neck back up. So, but the thing is that these occipital condyles are gliding against your atlas, the C1 vertebrae. So this is pulling everything here, like not just the skull, but all the meat and all the other tissues that are over here, up so that you're up like right. So if you're kind of like craning your head back, you're contracting these muscles right here. So this is an example of a first class lever where you have the load on one side, the pivot in the middle, and the force on the other side. Now second class lever, and this is the way to remember it, is like first class, how many skulls do you have? How many atlanto-occipital joints do you have? Well, if you're just talking about the overall bones, you only have one skull, so one neck, and this is a first class lever. Now second class lever, notice that the fulcrum is not in the middle at this point. So in this case, the fulcrum is at one end and the force is at the other end, and the weight, the load, is in the middle. So here's an example of a second class lever in your body. So here we have the pivot would be that if you contract your calf muscles such as your gastroc or gastrocnemius and your soleus, what they do is that they shorten this distance between here and the femur and the back of your heel over here, thereby drawing this heel closer toward your upper leg. So that's going to raise your heel, but what part do you pivot on? You pivot on the balls of your feet. So the fulcrum is here, the force is on the back of your calf and leg, and where's the load? Pretty much everything between that. So everything that's sitting right here on your foot, when you do a calf raise and you feel all that weight, that is the weight of your entire body, or it's everything except their toes over here. So this is a second class lever. So the way I remember is like, how many legs do people usually have? They have two legs and two calves, I should say. And this is an example of a second class lever. Now third class lever, so we had in the first class lever, fulcrum in the middle. Second class lever, we had the load in the middle. Now in third class lever, we have the force in the middle. So at one end we have the fulcrum, at one end we have the weight, we have the load, but we have the force, the muscle in the middle. And actually, if you took all of the muscles in your body and chose one at random, most of the muscles, chances are it'll probably be a third class lever. Most of the muscles in your body are a third class lever. Now, the mnemonic I like and was taught by my predecessor is that pretend you're curling a 3 pound weight. So a classic example of third class lever is your biceps brachii. And when you're curling that, and some of you I know are like, I can curl much more than that. Yeah, easy there. But it's like, but just for the there's no such thing as a 30 class lever. So if you just pretend you're just like lifting a third class lever with your biceps. And actually, when I was at the gym the other day, and I was like, oh wait, this is a third class lever, because what's happening here? Well, if you've seen this is the pivot, the fulcrum, the part that moves or is able to that this whole apparatus is able to pivot and rotate around. And then the load, this plate right here. And some of you are like, I know you're like, oh, this is weight. Hey, this is a warm up. But just to showing you here, this is a weight. This is the load being moved. And as you add more weight here, this would increase the load. Now, how do you actually pull this up? You are going to use this force right here between the fulcrum and the load. So this is an example of third class lever. Like a catapult is, but if you ever tried this, or there's also variations where they don't even have these handles. Like some people just pull this bar right there. It would still be a third class lever because you have it between the fulcrum and the load, and you have the force in the middle. So putting it all together, so first class lever, this is like a seesaw or pry bar in which you have the fulcrum in the middle, the weight on one end, and the force on the other end. And the force, by pulling and applying its force, helps to move the other side in the opposite direction. So here's an example, like your neck joint, your atlanto-occipital joint. So one skull, first class lever. Second class levers, so this is where the weight's in the middle, and classic example, so two calves, you have your balls of your feet, pivot on one end, you have the force, the muscles of your calf on the other end, and you have the rest of your body weight in the middle. Third class lever, this is where you have the pivot on one end, the fulcrum, and you have the weight on the other end, and the force in the middle. And again, most of the muscles in your body are third class levers. And the mnemonic, pretend you're using your biceps, which is a third class lever, to curl a 3-pound dumbbell. Now you might be like, wait, are there more classes? Well, you can shuffle these around, but say you shuffle force and load around. Well, you're just going to get the same thing as first class lever. So there's only 3 classes because these are the only combinations and you can have of your load, applied force, and fulcrum relative to each other. And that were levers in nutshells. Again, like I think they go pretty light on this in terms of but it's worth knowing. I think both OpenStax and the UHAMP and the Martini book, they all talk about what's a load, what's a fulcrum, and what is applied force as it relates to a lever.